talking about creativity, talking about why you think you just have this feeling they're going to do well or not do well or whatever. Francis is going to take over from here and do a case study on a student and take you through his academic life. And with that, I won't go into detail, but because she's going to run this part of it. But Francis from the Carter-Jenkins Center. Is it Marton? Is that it?
You already brought up a couple of issues that are very important to keep in mind. One has to do with a student's determination and a desire, really, to achieve.
Cheryl York, please report to the main office. Cheryl York, please report to the main office.
And the other really has to do with the people in their lives that make a difference, that connect with them, that help them find their niche. And that's where John has come in, and certainly all of you, in terms of the people and the students that are in your lives. So for today, in terms of thinking about the case study, what I will do is give you a little bit of information, and then, for some interaction, invite you to be thinking as I read the sections about your reactions to this child and what's going on in their life. Because you have a child come into a classroom or into your life, you have not just the academics, but you have a whole background in this child. And then also your own background that influences your interaction with the child. So then we'll take off our own blinders and begin to think about the child. We're handing out a piece of paper.
I should have did this before, but this is to go with the case study because she's going to prompt you to make a few little notes during the case study. And all we ask is that as she prompts you, you don't have to write essays, but she's going to prompt you, write a quick little note, and then you're going to turn these back in at the end. It's not going to be graded, so reduce your anxiety.
Really, to place the emphasis in the right place, the emphasis isn't about the writing right now. The emphasis is for us to be involved as a group as much as possible, to think about the case study and brainstorm about it. The writing, that's less important. The brainstorming right now about Lewis, the case study that she's going to present.
And that's really just to help you as I'm reading. Whatever thoughts come to mind, don't have you jot them down.
But if you didn't turn one in, it's not a big deal. Okay, like you said, it's more important to listen to the case study and participate.
Okay, the child that I'm going to talk about is Lewis. Lewis was the youngest of 3 boys growing up in a military family. At age 5, while living in Germany, Lewis's mother was diagnosed with cancer, and his mother was forced to return to the United States so that his mother could receive treatments. His mother passed away 1 year later when Lewis was 6 years of age in April of his first grade year in school. His brothers were ages 13 and 15. That summer, Lewis was sent to another state to live with an aunt and uncle along with his older brother. His father was retiring from the Army that November and kept his middle son with him to assist in the upcoming move. Lewis began 2nd grade and remembers seeing his father only once for a quick visit that September. When his father retired in November, he immediately remarried to a woman with 4 children, ages 8 through 16. Lewis's father moved and was finally reunited with Lewis and his oldest brother. Lewis was happy to see his father, but overwhelmed with his new, larger family. Lewis was still the baby of the family, but the family had grown. And all this change had occurred within 7 months of his mother's passing. So with that as an introduction, what's most striking about this little boy's experience here? What do you immediately react to? Okay, lost his mother in the first grade.
Poor kid, that's too much for one person, let alone a child, to handle. 7 months. Too many changes.
Too many changes.
He lost his whole family away. He lost his mother, then lost his father, then he went back, but it wasn't the same.
Yeah, lost his mother, lost his father. Yes.
That kid would need some help because that sounds like suicidal there. I'm serious.
Yeah, so a lot of change, no structure.
No nurturing.
No nurturing. Good point.
Time to have the feelings he had for his own mother. Time to deal with his dad. I mean, dad's gone. There's no bonding there.
Yeah, no, you bring up a good point in terms of the grief. How does a child grieve? And that can lead us into the next section in terms of what would you expect for this little boy? Because he's going into, he's going to be going into second grade with all of this change.
I would expect that he would be daydreaming a lot and getting poor grades, so then he'd be referred as a possible ADD candidate. The Roman School.
Okay.
I'd say a lot of anxiety, a lot of emotional trauma, depression, lack of identity. Who do I belong to? A lot there.
Striking out anger because all this stuff's been happening to him and he hasn't been able to.
Everybody here back there, maybe some anger.
Or the total opposite.
Or the
inside.
Right.
He may be afraid to make relationships with people because he might be afraid to lose them too.
Very good point.
Probably be doing little things to get some attention. With the larger family and still being the youngest one.
Anyone else?
Probably just isolate himself. That's some of the same things. I think he would isolate
Repeat what they say.
Okay, that he was just saying that he could also potentially isolate himself. And you're all bringing up possible behaviors in terms of human reactions to different kinds of events.
I feel this is the kind of child that is at home he would isolate himself because he would not feel like an individual with all this turmoil going on. And at school he would probably be a behavioral problem. He would be wanting to hold on to the teacher all the time and would enjoy the attention he's getting, even though it would be probably manual attention.
Everybody hear that? That at home she felt like it's possible for him to isolate himself in this large group, new group, and then possibly at school be attention-seeking behaviors and maybe inappropriate. Okay.
Okay, Lewis was transferred to a new school in the middle of his second grade year. Although he did well academically, his behavior was not always the best in school. He was not aggressive, but he would make jokes and talk without permission. He would always receive low grades in the areas of practice of self-discipline, which would anger his father. On one occasion, Lewis was grounded for an entire grading period and told that he would remain grounded if that grade did not improve. In Lewis's family, grounded was like jail. For 9 weeks, Lewis was not allowed to leave the yard, have friends over, no TV, no phone, and at 8 p.m. bedtime, even on the weekends. This is in second grade. Lewis's next report card improved out of fear of remaining grounded for an additional 9 weeks. During that time, his father and stepmother never met with the teacher. They based all of their information solely on report cards every 9 weeks. In third grade, Lewis's new stepmother began to show signs of mental illness. She suffered from depression and severe mood swings. During his elementary school years, his stepmother attempted suicide on 2 occasions and was hospitalized several times for depression and mental illness. Lewis feared his stepmother because she abused him physically and emotionally. She would blame Lewis for things he did not do and punish him by making him write lines, and restricting him to his room. She also favored her biological daughter, who was 1 year older than Lewis and could do no wrong. During the 3rd to 5th grade, Lewis spent a great deal of time in his room alone. Okay, how about if we stop there and think about, where he's at now and the kinds of issues that, we have to begin thinking about.
Fear.
Fear? You're good?
Anger. It says internal anger is started to build up inside of the public.
So anger that begins to build up.
And a lot of depression.
Depression. He's isolating himself in that house. I hate to say he's damned if he does, he's damned if he doesn't. I mean, there's a no-win situation for him.
Self-esteem issues.
Self-esteem issues,
Yeah.
feeling damned if you do, damned if you don't, isolating himself.
He probably uses school as a place where he can have fun, even though he may get in trouble a lot. At least he feels he probably could be himself in the school setting and exhibit some of these behaviors that are probably negative or potentially sinful. And then at home he tries to be a perfect person, but it doesn't happen because he's still always in trouble, so he isolates.
I would pray that he does not begin to imitate some of those suicidal behaviors.
Good point.
Or the abusive behaviors, suicidal behaviors, in terms of a way of managing the depression.
I think the teacher should work on self-esteem and decision-making with him. He doesn't have a lot of control over what goes on and things that deeply affect him. This might be teach him some leadership, teach him some making choices, making decisions, and give him some things, some real concrete things either in the classroom or projects to build up his self-esteem.
Yeah, well, the issue of loss of control is a good point. What do you do in a child, with a child like this, where nothing in their life really is
If he was a big kid, I'd be
control.
afraid of him if I were another kid.
Right, and also keep in mind that some teachers don't know what's going on at home.
Yeah, that's true.
Especially if the parents aren't meeting with them or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but you're bringing up a very good point.
But you want to give a kid like that some
Listen up.
Being alone, internalization, where you're going to be seeing acting out, so bullying behavior because of the result of sourcing the anger and not being isolated in at home. You want to so kids be getting some control physically over another person.
Okay. The idea of potential outcome is that he'll become a bully. Michael?
Aggressive.
Yeah, aggressive.
Yeah, and for us to be thinking right now also, Lewis is this period of time between the 3rd and the 5th grade. How old is he, and what developmental issues are important at this stage? What are people thinking about where Lewis is developmentally right now, and what are the needs of this period of time, and what kind of developmental issues are most at the surface at this age? Any thoughts about that?
What is he now?
Third, yeah.
Third to fifth grade, so like 9 or 10.
Uh-huh.
Next, he hasn't gotten into adolescence.
No, not yet.
Not yet. Right. That idea of fear is for adolescents.
Peer pressure. Yeah. Going out riding his bike, going movies with his friends, outside playing baseball. He's not doing any of that, which Little League or anything like that. Right?
That's true. You would think that this is right toward the end of latency when needing to be involved in those kinds of activities are very important.
This is when he first starts to develop a real true person-to-person friendships.
Yeah.
Where being part of a group
Right.
of people outside of the family is very important.
Right.
What I'm also seeing too is that the parents' punishment is too long for what's going on.
That's right.
And also it's too harsh, and it could be a way of the parents not even wanting to interact with this child at all.
Right.
Because 9 weeks in a room, that means there's no interaction going on with the parents.
The punishment didn't fit the crime.
No.
There's no way we're not teaching the child not to do it. It's just putting them in isolation.
Right.
Yeah, so you have the discipline, that's excessive for a child at this age. So parents sort of being out of touch with what is expectable. The idea of favoritism. I mean, there's already been an experience of a lot of losses in this child's life, as well as new people coming into his life and a closer environment in terms of his father, the additional siblings, and not being the favored one either. Yes?
Well, also during the years that he really needed his mother, she wasn't there for him. And now he's getting into the age where he needs to emulate and respect his father, and they need to interact. And his father doesn't sound like a male that's available for him at all either. So.
Right. So you bring again the importance of role models and the function that actually all of you serve in the classroom, potentially serve for some of the kids that you have, that you may not even know that they're using you in that way.
Piggybacking off of what she said, at least if he would have had that nurturing with his mother, he would have had something to fall back on or to remember. But
Right.
since he didn't have that, and now the father's not in place either.
Well, you bring up a good point. What, how does a child mourn? And what did he have in those first 5 years? Those 5 years are very important years. And, some of that we don't know in terms of what that relationship, in terms of his relationship with his mother, what he had gotten from that. Yes?
Thus far, I haven't heard a whole lot of intervention skills from the teacher, but it would probably be a child that should have been referred to the social worker or guidance counselor because there's been no interaction with the parents at all. He's acting out in school. You don't have any information except he's lost his mother at this point, so you would want to know that as a teacher. You would want to be able to know how to deal with it because you don't know. You have no idea what's going on at home.
Remember too, he bounced a couple schools.
Right.
So, you lose track. And so the teacher may have started figuring something out when he moved.
That's just a very important part. If you don't know your child's history, then you really aren't an asset to them. If you just going on a whim.
Right. So how important it is to find out about the kids that are in your class, so to know their histories, especially with those kids that can get lost in the cracks in terms of moving schools. How, if there isn't, how does that information become available to you? Because, a kid like this, you're right, should be referred to a social worker or something, but you have to have some of that information for that even to begin to happen.
And at this point, there hasn't been any aggression at school.
Right. Right.
So there's no real big flags. I mean, talking and getting in trouble, joking around, or whatever. That could be seen as typical behavior.
Yeah.
So there may not be a flag, an I-team, and all that stuff going on yet.
So the only way that you would know is by talking with the child and finding that information out. You have to see them as a special individual person that has a history.
And if he's an abused child, he's not going to tell you anything.
Yeah. That's a good point. A lot of abused children will not talk about it because they have fear of retribution.
Right. Yes.
Also, if the father was military and retired and maybe has a job, they probably don't fall into that real low socioeconomic where you really are alerted to some problems. A lot of kids that seem okay and present as normal kids are having a lot of difficulties at home, and you might not get to that unless you really, kind of talk to them all.
Right. There are a lot of different issues that one can talk about here. And actually on the Carter-Jenkins websites, there are some lectures that are targeting different kinds of topics, like mourning and loss in childhood, and how children at different ages mourn. Because even with this boy, he's not going to express the loss and sadness because children can't hold on to it for that long. Their worries really have much more to do with, who's going to take care of me? Am I going to have enough to eat? Those kinds of issues. And the behavior may change from expressing a lot of sadness to actually the denial or the opposite, where you're making jokes and, being the life of the party, denying that anything has happened. So we have to be aware of what some of the behaviors that children use to protect their emotional world. So anyway, on the website there are different kinds of programs that have to do with these kinds of issues. Mourning and loss in children, role of looking at conduct disorders and the different kinds of factors that can influence a child's behaviors, including adoption, divorce, death, remarriage, having a reconstituted family, and how a child reacts to those sorts of things. Because oftentimes the children's reaction is a reaction to something that's going on in their life. Okay, while in 4th grade, Lewis began playing baseball for a local Little League. Go Lewis. For 2 years, he was an all-star pitcher and was an excellent batter and player. However, his family never came to a game, and his father only came to 1 game in 2 years. Lewis rode his bike to practice and to every game. That's the determination we were talking about. He led his team to the playoffs both years and was the youngest player selected on the all-star team. One playoff game was very important and was even broadcast live on local radio. His family promised that they were all coming to the game because Lewis was pitching. However, they never showed. When Lewis arrived at home on his bike, his father told him that they had decided to stay at home and record the game from the radio. Lewis was very disappointed. In 4th and 5th grade, Lewis was put into an advanced program for above-average learners because he was doing very well academically. However, in 6th grade, he changed schools and returned to a regular classroom. This was before IEPs for gifted students that would follow him from school to school. Meanwhile, his 2 biological brothers had moved out of the house because of the chaos in the family. One of his brothers was 16 when he left, one was 17. Now Lewis was alone to fend for himself with a dysfunctional stepfamily and a stepmother with severe mental health issues. Okay, at this point, let's look at what are the strengths that we see in Lewis at this time. Intelligence. An achiever.
You brought up a good point about baseball. He started getting involved in some outside things.
Outside outlets, he's coping.
He's a leader.
He's a
Right.
leader.
Self-motivated.
Yeah, very much.
Very.
Yeah. And it's also focused outside of the family.
Exactly.
Which is
Independent.
Yeah, which is an escape, but it's also a positive escape. He's not outside the family being the ringleader of the local bully. Okay, in 7th grade, Lewis's stepmother beat him for something, and Lewis ran away to a neighbor's house. The neighbor called his father after he returned home and discussed the situation with him. This was the first time Lewis ever told his father about the abuse from his stepmother. And again, see there too, an outside influence. He was always afraid that she might retaliate once his father returned to work. Lewis's father was already contemplating a divorce, and this information helped him finalize his decision. Lewis's father divorced his stepmother, and they both moved in with an uncle and aunt in the transition for several months. These moves caused Lewis to attend 2 different schools that year. During the end of 7th grade, Lewis moved into a new home with his father, and one of his brothers moved back in with the family. The other brother would stop by often, giving some sense of normal family life. Life was good for the next few months until his father impregnated a woman that he dated a couple of times and married her quickly. So again, Lewis's family life was disrupted when his new stepmother moved in with 2 daughters and 1 child on the way. Lewis's older brother again was forced to move away because there was not enough room. Lewis was very disappointed because his father remarried within 7 months of his divorce, similar to when his mother passed away. So, this is true. It's not as if one's making things up. This is. So, how do we expect that Lewis would be experiencing his father's action? You know,
I think great disappointment. No
Uh-huh.
no positive role modeling.
A lot of apprehension when he really doesn't know the woman and he doesn't know if she's going to be the same way as the previous stepmother.
So apprehension.
He's developed a lot of coping skills, though. He's gone through this before.
Yes, okay, he's familiar with his ground.
Right, yes. But it can also work against his motivation because he can start to feel that every time he makes a stride, he gets set back through no fault of his own. So,
Mhm. Absolutely.
helplessness tends to responsive actions are not being enforced.
Yeah, it's like how much can he take? You know, how many times can this happen? Yes.
I bet he'll start having some problems with relationships with females.
Plus,
Good-
he probably
good
doesn't
prediction.
have,
Yeah.
he probably doesn't have any close friends because they keep,
They keep moving.
and all.
Right.
So I mean, he doesn't have that support either.
And he's hitting he's adolescent now. So
And
12
he's
or
hitting
13,
adolescence.
and, oh boy.
What kinds of problems might you anticipate with girls, with women? So
Okay, so
he
possibly
might
abusive.
become abusive?
Well, but then every woman just has left him, though. He's got abandonment issues when it comes to women. Mom died, stepmom abused him, and dad left her, and now dad impregnated another woman, and he's got to deal with her. So I don't think he's got a really good, positive feeling about women.
So what might he do?
Yeah, given
He
that
might
he's now going to go into
be a
adolescence.
womanizer. Like his
Said he
mom.
might rape
Might rape somebody?
He said abuse.
Abuse.
And he might have frequent short relationships with women.
Right. Frequent short relationships. Yeah.
But I say on the other hand, he could be loving because that's what he's looking for.
Yeah.
How to hear that?
The idea of possibly he could be loving since that's what it is that he's looking for and
If
needs.
he's cognitively aware that what he's going through is not appropriate, then he may do the love. You know, he may look for a better one.
And we know that he's intelligent, so he might be able to think about those things.
Yeah,
We can't say that his intellect is coinciding with his emotionality. I mean, I'm concerned that yes, he's understanding academically. Yes, he's learning athletically, and he's getting these good grades. But he still has not first mourned his mom, like you were saying, and then he hasn't, addressed his father and his derelict behavior. I mean, it's just there's so much. It can go either way.
Yeah, and each time, each developmental phase brings in new issues to deal with, as well as a revival of past issues to deal with. And here he is going into, adolescence, dealing with a lot of changes, a lot of losses.
Two stepsisters.
Stepsisters, so you're thinking potentially abusive towards the stepsisters. The idea of dealing with the sexuality. How does he deal with the sexuality?
Yeah, I'm picturing him. I'm thinking he's got some competencies in sports, and he's got the intelligence. He's got on paper he looks like a successful, competent person, but I think with the females he may be demanding, maybe jealous, maybe, shit him a little bit, and where were you, and why were you talking to that guy, and
Might be what do they call them? Jealous types.
sure, just jealous and controlling.
Controlling, yeah. Jealous,
okay.
controlling.
Well, even you mentioned something about him being smart, maybe being able to overcome some of the issues that he has with women. But even if he does, inside growing up with that, he'll always waiting for the other shoe to fall. He meets a nice woman and tries to develop that trust. He'll always wait for that other shoe to fall.
Yeah.
When's it going to happen?
Yeah.
And then what might a child do if they're expecting a shoe to fall? How might they master that, or what might they do to deal with that?
It's called a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So they might sabotage. They might make.
Clarissa Martin, would you please report to the main office? Clarissa Martin, please report to the main office.
That's just a reminder that we're in school.
Yeah.
They didn't even really need to make that announcement.
Without him having the knowledge that he might be doing this, how is he ever going to be able to change it? I mean, you're asking, which way he would go, and I'm thinking, he might go the route where she's saying, where he sabotages everything, or he might just, I don't know, he might just hate women altogether, and he might just, or he might not join up, or he might just run off.
And what kind of knowledge are you saying we might have that would help us determine that? Is that what you're saying? We don't have the knowledge about him, or he doesn't have knowledge?
Well, does he have the knowledge to know what a normal relationship is supposed to, supposed to look like? I mean, his mom died when he was a baby. His dad remarried 7 months after mom died, so that his dad didn't go through any grief that I know of, and neither did he. And this woman abused him. Then 7 months after divorcing that one, he hooks up with another one, so we don't even know his relationship with her. What is she nurturing, or is she accepting of him? So I mean,
it's very hard to predict when you don't. It's kind of like the crime dramas, where you're trying to solve this mystery, but you only got little pieces of the puzzle or little bits of information, and so it's hard to put it all together. And unfortunately, the human brain is so complex that it's not as easy in a 60-minute documentary or CSI or something on TV.
Right.
When you go through that, you start hustling women.
Okay.
Coach says he could be hustling women.
That's true. And his intellect, will he use that to understand himself, or will he use it to develop this, facade that looks good to everybody out here, but he's got this demented, inner thing about him.
And then his perception of love is going to be what he saw, seen his dad do.
Exactly.
And obviously, dad's perception of love is skewed because when you really love somebody, you're not going to get married. 7 months after that person is gone.
But we all know that that's not unusual.
No, it's not.
Okay. Whether it's appropriate or not, you know that divorce is right, and people are hooking up faster and getting married faster, and gone are the 2-year engagements. They boom. Sometimes it's financial.
And sometimes it's emotional. The idea of looking to have someone help, and both parties can do that. Wanting someone to help with raising the kids, or having somebody there to, babysit or to be home. Those kinds of things.
Maybe dad's just picking bad choice, or not good judgment.
Well, and something that I heard someone say that we won't really have time to cover is Dad has issues. And at one point, Dad was little. And what do we know happened to Dad? We don't know.
And Dad also lost his mark.
Right.
So there were some other things. But,
There's a lot of things there.
okay, we're going to move on to the next stage.
Let's move on. Okay, so we had a revival of a lot of past issues in terms of past experiences of loss, of mother's death, loss of the position in the family again, the idea of feeling possibly responsible, for what's going on. But we also have, at least for the first time, some kind of sense of being listened to by his father. That his father took something into account as far as his experience and, took some action. And we have the neighbor that clearly was very important and influential in, in supporting this child. Okay, the idea of academically, what would you be expecting? Well, 8th through 10th grade were average academic years for Lewis. He began to excel in music and drama and was receiving a great deal of positive attention from teachers and classmates. However, as before, his family never attended his performances, and Lewis felt that he was raising himself. His father never asked how was school, or inquired about the many performances that Lewis was involved in at school. In 8th and 9th grade, Lewis became sexually active with his girlfriend of 2 years. At age 13, he was even talking about marrying his girlfriend, and he spent most of his time at her house. They were voted the cutest couple in middle school because they were the only couple that actually they dated for a long time. In 10th grade, Lewis's girlfriend broke his heart and left him for another boy. The other boy was in 11th grade and had a car. Lewis was very hurt because the boy was even a friend of his. And he even had the same name, first name, Lewis. However, Lewis continued to excel in music and drama and was fairly popular in high school. However, during the summer, after the 10th grade, Lewis was seduced by an older married woman. There it is. what I'm saying.
Hard to believe.
You know, this is all.
This has turned into a country song.
That's why we gave you the paper. You begin
Yeah,
to
I'm
write
writing
down
the
the
tune
words.
right now.
So he was seduced by an older married woman. The woman was 25 and Lewis was 15. Although Lewis knew that she was married, he quickly fell in love with this very attractive woman. After 6 months, Lewis's father learned of the affair and told his stepmother. Lewis returned home from school to see his father and stepmother screaming at this woman in Lewis's living room. The woman agreed to stop seeing Lewis to appease his parents. And Lewis's parents never reported the incident to the authorities. Okay, let's stop there for a moment and think about, what do we see happening to Lewis in this developmental stage? Okay, more rejection. You have the girlfriend that dumps him. You also have a positive thing there.
Yeah,
you have 2 years.
2-year relationship.
And you have to assume if it's 2 years that it was probably good.
So he has the ability to relate.
Hang on.
That's right.
And you did bring up something about sexuality,
Yeah.
that although it's not as unusual today to see younger teens having sex, it is kind of unusual for a 13-year-old boy to be having a sexual relationship long term with a girl, not just a one time, and thinking about marriage. That was one intrigue.
Yeah, that idea. And someone had mentioned that earlier.
He was 13 to 15 when he dated this girl. And then he was 15 when she broke up. The older woman who was 25, that old lady.
But he's definitely searching for some kind of shooting with the female side. I mean, he's not shying away from men or nothing. He's searching for that love and wants to continue it.
That he's searching for a loving relationship and a nurturing relationship, which was there with the girlfriend, and then,
Which both were ended not by him.
Right.
But
That's
the
right.
relationship doesn't seem to be negative or abusive.
No.
And what do people think about Lewis's identification with his father right now? Is there any identification with the father?
I think they have a relationship. He's taken away, in the kid's eyes, he's taken away any female that he's loved and brought in other females that are abusive.
But back there she said, got to have a woman.
Right.
So, also maybe that element of it.
Because his father did that.
Yeah,
As soon as he lost one, he'd go find another one.
Right.
So, might be modeling after that.
Sort of identifying.
Well, all right, I'm going to take the unpopular thing and say, if it was a girl that was 15 and a guy that was 25, we would have addressed that more as his, kind of victimization of an older adult. And even though he's a boy, we don't really look at it like that. It's very true that that's highly inappropriate, highly, the balance of power is very skewed in a situation like that. So that might be not as positive a thing as some of the men in the room may think.
So is this trauma?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's very
Definitely emotional things that he wasn't ready for.
So he may be
15-year-old
experiencing
could possibly be ready for.
certain feelings of powerlessness or helplessness. Or
I mean, you also have an adolescent that's dealing with their sexual feelings.
Right.
And
he's thinking it's love.
And an adult is taking advantage of that.
I mean, he said he was in love with this older woman. Is that what I read? You heard you
he was
say?
very, very
Could have been.
attracted and attached to this.
Oh, okay. But he didn't think anything. Did he say he loved her?
It said love.
Yeah.
Yeah, he quickly fell in love
Fell
with
in
her.
love with her.
Fell in love with her. Love.
Well, what I find intriguing, though, is here's parents who've just totally been uninvolved, and now
I'm sorry.
and they're picturing a negative way for him, as opposed to maybe talking with him, finding out the whole picture. But
Did everybody hear what she
well,
said?
and here are two
The
men
parents who were never
who
involved,
were never
all of a sudden they're involved.
and all of a sudden they're involved.
Right, but also taking away.
That he's had.
What was interesting,
Replace the girlfriend.
well, what was interesting too, they got involved, but then never really did anything about it.
No, they didn't.
They didn't go to the authorities or anything
So
like that.
therefore, here's another lesson that, it's okay to get involved, but then you don't do anything else with it. You stop.
Yeah, so another way is also
It's
trying
negative.
not a positive.
The interesting thing about this is Dad gets involved when he finds out that his son is being abused. That's the only time he gets involved with his son.
I think he's jealous because he's.
And he got, when his father finally found out that stepmom was beating him up, that's when Dad got involved.
And took action.
And took action.
But that was only because he was on bad relations with her as well.
Well, I understand that, but I'm just making a bit of an analogy here. And then he and stepmom, the new stepmom, find out that he's seeing an older woman, and Dad feels that that woman's taking advantage of my baby. You can't do that to my son. And boom, he gets involved that
So
time.
Lewis is getting attention when bad things happen.
Exactly.
And not so much when he's excelling in baseball or music or whatever. We should move on.
Well, yeah, but the other thing is, too, that the father reacts when he learns from somewhere else.
Exactly. He's not learning from his own son. He's learning it from outside.
Not trying to
Yeah.
investigate on his own.
So the idea of how he reacts to what people think.
Exactly. Here,
right. Okay, so we have the role of the older woman, the loss of the girlfriend, the loss of the mother, the loss of the friend, and betrayal, and going into 11th grade. So here's this guy kind of crushed. So during 11th grade, Lewis began skipping school and eventually was called into the office to meet with the assistant principal. He was told that he would fail the semester because of attendance reasons and that the assistant principal recommended night school. Lewis discussed dropping out of school with his father. His father told him, if you go to night school, you will be responsible for buying your own books. However, he did not encourage Lewis to stay in school. His father never completed high school, and neither did his oldest brother. Lewis dropped out of school in 11th grade and began night school. He worked full-time during the day. During 12th grade, in night school, Lewis began dating a girl who he met in a band that he started. He graduated high school through the night school program and immediately joined the Coast Guard. After boot camp, he married his girlfriend. He had just turned 19 and she was 18. Okay, so at this point, what kind of future would you anticipate given this case history so far?
6 months.
6 months?
If they're married 6 months?
If they're married, okay.
Back to
what else?
I think you'll do well. I thought that from the beginning of the story, actually, because he sees all this negative stuff and it's like.
He's still trying. He's still trying, okay? A lot of negative stuff, but there's that determination.
So in a sense, kids learn not just about the good things, but also from the bad things.
Right, yeah.
The fact that he finished high school, that's a good
That's right, that determination to finish high school, that he took that inside.
And he was on drugs. He's been a teen for 2 years. I think he still would have been with the 25-year-old if the parents wouldn't have intervened. But I still think she gave him what he was looking for, whether she was married or not. And that happens every day, so. And I think whatever she taught him in that little bit of time, he can apply it to his marriage.
Yeah, but that was also coming, a rebound effect too from having the relationship with his girlfriend, which was very serious, breakup. And
how many married people do you see stay in relationship with mistresses for years and years and years? Because they're being fed what they need on this end and not getting what they want at home or whatever, however it works. But
so the idea, the role of the older woman really serving a very important function in this boy's life. That not only just looking at the abuse.
Yeah, he doesn't see himself as a victim. He's definitely a survivor.
Right. And he doesn't see himself as a victim, as a survivor. He goes on. He finds opportunities for himself. He, went to night school. He goes in the military. There also may be an identification there too with his father, and also finding some structure for himself. But he's doing better than his dad. Okay. Well, let's. I know we have only a few more minutes. Let me bring you up to date with what happened to Lewis. Okay, Lewis attended cook training in the Coast Guard and remained for 10 years. During his enlistment, his wife attended college and graduated with a BA in geology. She encouraged Lewis to return to college, and they moved back to their hometowns close to their families. Lewis obtained a job as the food service manager at a local residential treatment center for abused and neglected children. He worked there for 5 years while he attended college. Although he initially considered a degree in music education, he soon changed his mind and obtained his degree in special education. After working in the school system as a special education teacher, Lewis became frustrated watching special education students leave school thinking that they could only work in fast food or bagging groceries. He remembered his high school days and his inability to learn from a book. Lewis always disliked reading, even in college. He approached the state in an effort to begin an alternative vocational training program. Partnered with a large hotel corporation and started his hands-on vocational program to train people for entry-level cooking jobs. The program has received state and national attention as an effective method of preparing people with disabilities for the food service industry. During the past 5 years, the program has received many applications from deaf students. Lewis returned to school to learn American Sign Language so that he could effectively communicate with his deaf students without the use of an interpreter. He has been married for 23 years and has 1 daughter.
Woo! You're right!
In 2002, he was voted Tampa Bay Chamber of Commerce as the Small Business Leader of the Year. And of course, by now you know that we have Lewis here today.
Lewis is my middle name.
I have one question.
Yes.
Did you ever grieve?
You know, because they're analysts, I felt like I was in therapy when we were doing putting this presentation together. And she asked how much I remember of my mother, you know, before she was sick and all. And when she got sick, she was unavailable. And I said, well, the stories, I know mostly from stories my relatives tell me, and that she loves soap operas and watched soap operas all day. And I made the comment to Frances, well, so I might have been sitting in a playpen all day. And Frances said, or you might have been in her arms.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just sat in your chair. I was like, sign me up for some more counseling. I made it. But, you know, obviously I got some nurturing from my mother before I even knew it. If you recall it. The couple aunts that I had that I moved in with, and then we moved again, and I moved in with this aunt. Got some nurturing from my girlfriend from 13 to 15, and she could nurture. And I was and I agree, the 25-year-old that seduced me and was married, she met some of my needs. And I was, you know what, I was meeting some of hers because she was being neglected by her husband. He wasn't being abused, but it was a symbiotic, or whatever you want to call it, relationship, but inappropriate. And but you're right, I was seeking a lot of attention, but I was trying to do it in a positive way. I didn't do it consciously. And I think that the reason I wanted to do it for Hillsborough County Schools is that I dropped out of Jefferson High School in 11th grade. And nobody tried to stop me. And the people that were instrumental in my life, it started in 8th grade. I had a music teacher. I was playing and trying to take guitar lessons because it was an elective. And I didn't really have an affinity for it, but I liked singing. And I saw them in chorus singing the school song. And I said, hey, do you guys need guys in the chorus? And this music teacher also taught chorus. Left the class alone. Took me to the office, changed my schedule, put me in the chorus, and then he caused me to be a leader in the chorus because there was only like 8 guys. And then when I went into high school, he was the musical director for the Miss Tampa pageant for 2 years in a row. He asked me to come to perform in the pageant both years. I was 16. I was the choreographer for the Miss Tampa pageant for 2 years in a row. And because he would say, do it. And I would say, well, I need some help. He goes, no, you got the talent. You go. You figure it out. What do you want to do? What songs do you want to do? I'll just help you with that. And we sang and danced and came out when they were changing clothes. There was John. I always wanted to be a performer because what you didn't find out in the story is my oldest brother is a professional drummer. And he moved away fast, but I always admired him. He's in the band Firefall. You are the woman that I've always dreamed of. And so he played drums, so I was the only white boy in the neighborhood that could dance. You know. So I always wanted to be a musician. I met my wife. She was the bass player in my band in '78, and she's Puerto Rican. Ooh, and I fell in love fast. And she don't even play the bass anymore. But we, you know, she encouraged me, and then, you know, that teacher was a big influence as far as my creativity. And then, of course, my wife. I wish I could have her here and just hug her and say thank you to her a million times, because she, like the teacher, encouraged me. She saw more. And this is a guy, I turned down the GI Bill in boot camp because they give you an opportunity to sign up for the GI Bill in the military, which is the #1 benefit of joining the military. It's free college. And I went, I ain't never going to college. I will keep my money. And so I was kicking myself in the butt, working full-time, going to USF. And luckily the children's home I was working at paid for a portion of my school. But my wife, the big motivator, she kept saying, you know, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And also one officer in the military in the Coast Guard. I was in almost 10 years, and he said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I'm halfway to retirement. What do you mean, Cap? And he said, well, don't get me wrong. I like you in the Coast Guard, but you could be so much more. And I'm like, are you trying to push me away? Am I doing something wrong? And he said, no. What do you want to? I said, I've always wanted to be a teacher. And he said, get out. Go. It's hard to do it on a ship. And recently, I sent all the program information with videos and stuff. He's now a full work captain in the Coast Guard. He's in charge of governmental affairs in Washington. And I sent it to him to thank him. And he sent it back, and I said he was my spark. And he goes, no, you always have the spark. You know, but when they were talking about doing this training, this session, and this analyzing creativity and inspiring, and what happens, and they also wanted participants that had some conflict and had barriers that popped up throughout their lives, and it was actually kind of therapeutic for me to do this. Plus, listening to your responses. It's the first time we've ever done this. Listening to your responses about, I would say be angry, and he'd be not. That wasn't that bad. But I tell you what, I was the class clown. I always wanted to make people laugh, and I was wanting attention. But I was never medicated, and it was before IEPs. And I went to Meacham for 4th and 5th grade, and they used to take all the above average learners, it wasn't called gifted, to the Learning Center, which is now the YMCA on Palm. And we'd go there twice a week, and it was like college. We had to have sodas, and I was, it was creative writing classes, and I was writing. And then 6th grade, boom. Because remember back in the old days, you went 6th grade to a center, 7th to a center, 8th and 9th. Thank God they changed that back. But anyway, we thank you for your participation.